Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carol Naughton. I'm the CEO of Purpose-Built Communities, and I am delighted to be here with you. At Purpose-Built Communities, we believe that everyone has the right to live in a healthy, safe neighborhood that supports them on their journey to becoming everything that they want to become happy, healthy, economically mobile. We do this by working with local leaders to create those kinds of neighborhoods that move the needle on economic mobility, on health outcomes, and on racial equity. We focus on creating healthy neighborhoods that include mixed income housing, a cradle through college education pipeline, and the kinds of community health and wellness partners that help move the needle on the social determinants of health. In all the neighborhoods that we support, there is what we call a community quarterback organization that helps this really complicated, long-term, cross-sectoral work with the community to help achieve the goals that the community has set forth and said that are important to them. We support 28 neighborhoods around the country. And I will tell you, as hard as this work is in every aspect of it, there is nothing harder or more important than creating great opportunities for schools and neighborhood organizations to partner together. If you want to be a neighborhoodist, which is what we call ourselves at Purpose-Built Community, it just rolls off the tongue, neighborhoodists, you've got to find ways for all of your partners to really be everything that they can be in a coordinated and helpful way. Today, we're going to talk about why that's necessary and how that's necessary. And we've got two great folks with us who are going to help lead that conversation. One of the things I'm most excited about having these two on our panel is that they both have experience both on the ground in working in communities and schools, and also at the 30,000 foot level and thinking about what are the kinds of policies and systems change that need to be enacted in order to help great things happen in communities. So first, let me introduce Jose Munoz. Jose is the director of the Coalition for Community Schools and a vice president for Equity and Impact with the Institute for Educational Leadership. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Glad you're here. I'd also like to welcome Paul Reville. Paul is the Francis Keppel Professor of Practice and Educational Policy and Administration and the founder and director of the Education Redesign Lab at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Carol. Good to be with you and Jose.
Thank you. We only have a short amount of time, so we're going to dive right into it. First, Paul, we're starting with the premise that partnerships between schools and neighborhood organizations are in fact essential for setting young people on a path to upward economic mobility. Tell us why you believe that's so.
Well, let me start by saying, Carol, I was struck yesterday on MLK Day, reading the New York Times, and there was an article there about some of his speeches and talking about the next speech that he had planned prior to his assassination, which was a warning to the country entitled "Why America May Go to Hell." And it was his challenge to the country to use its vast resources to end poverty and to offer all of God's children the necessities of life. Mm. And it struck me in thinking about today that that's a theme for the moment we have. I want to talk really from the 30,000 foot level for a moment. I think we're in this moment where the prevailing winds are changing. I'm an optimist. I see things as positive opportunities here, and the work in which we've heard so eloquently described by so many people on the panel, and so many of you are engaged in this work. I think there's an opportunity in this crisis which contains both danger and opportunity to move this work to the center of our national conversation, because I think this event, the pandemic, has revealed these to the general public, much like a tidal wave being lifted off the ocean floor, gross, persistent inequities that bedevil the lives of children and families who come to our schools and get in the way of schools being able to do their job. So that's, in a sense, my answer to Jeff's question about what do we do about the schools? Well, the schools only consume 20% of a child's waking hours between kindergarten and grade 12. And in order to change what happens in the schools, we're going to have to change the ecosystem, the neighborhoods, the environment from which children come to schools. And in order to do that, we need to do the good work that all of you are doing and talking about today, is bringing the whole community to the table and describing a new cradle to career pipeline that meets every child where he or she is and gives them what they need from the earliest childhood to the time that they get a fulfilling job. So in order to do this, my conviction is that we need to seize this moment to describe a new social compact, a children's accord, in effect, a Marshall Plan to end childhood poverty. And if we're going to do it in combination with the schools, and here we come to the education question, but it's really a community question, we're going to need structure. So for example, at the Education Redesign Lab, where we're dedicated to changing the national conversation about child development and education, we need to build structures like children's cabinets, like Promise Neighborhoods, like Harlem Children's Zones, like Strive Together, putting in place structures where members, leading members, grassroots, grass tops come together to begin to describe in their particular community, what does that cradle to career pipeline look like? They need, at the same time, the community needs the capacity, not just to think about this work, but to actually do the work. Schools need the capacity. They're overloaded. The biggest complaint of school people is they don't have time. So at this point, they're going to need the additional capacity to reach out and engage with the community in meaningful ways. And then we need systems to bring coherency to that collaboration, to make it efficient, effective, and inclusive. So, in conclusion, I just say that we've got to develop the national will to make a major investment, set a priority on doing the kind of work that folks have been talking about today, putting in place the structure, the capacity, and the systems to bring coherency to this work.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think that's really a compelling case. Jose, now that we've talked about kind of the why and the why now, tell us a little bit about the how. What have you been working on? What have you seen that works in creating the kinds of partnerships between schools and community organizations that are really effective at supporting children?
Yeah, first, Carol, hats off to my peers in the last session. That was fire. Great job, you guys. That was on fire right there. And I couldn't agree more with Paul, and to build off of what they said as far as the structures in place. But instead of giving you different places where things were happening yet, I'll come to that. But let me give you some themes that popped out. 2020 was a tough year, as everybody knows. And schools and communities did great things, not in spite of what was happening on, but because of it. And so they were primed and positioned because they had structures in place. But more importantly, when we talk about the how, they had processes in place. So most people think of community schools as a wraparound service place. It is way beyond that. This is about community design development. This is the very process in place that Paul talked about, where people actually come to the table frequently enough. Consistency breeds intensity. So when you talk about the how of a community school, if you could think about the nearly 100,000 plus public schools across the country, if they all invested the time and their talent and their treasure in building in, I'm gonna give you an alliteration of the next iteration of community schools. 3 things: communication. Name a building in a community that has more communication power than a public school. Now, I know Paul talked about the waking hour of a child, but if you did nothing else but open 180 days and master the communication of that, you have a captive audience of entire neighborhoods for at least 40% of the year. So communication is one thing that community schools do well, bringing people to place frequently. The next thing, after listening and learning and planning with each other, is coordination. You got to have somebody whose job it is to wake up and put the processes in place so communication turns into some type of plan, and that plan is being executed to create the equity that everybody is looking for. The final C of the alliteration, I'll say collaboration. We talked about collaboration at a system level, but at a neighborhood level, you need a process. Organizers do this well. Community organizers do this really well, but it can't just stop at organizing. It has to continue to lead up the elevation as you introduce this, is as far as the different elevations where we work. So it actually begins to change, to inform and change the other alliteration I say is the policies, the personal agendas, and the politics. And so some of that, how, what does it look like across the country? From Albuquerque, New Mexico, my home place where I'm at right now, where a group of community school coordinators in several schools created a hub within a zone, to use the promise zone type theme, to said, you know, this is a census year. This is going to impact our neighborhood over the next 10 years. Where they actually increased their participation by like 6%, where you can calculate the 3,000 plus people, and which is about $12 million per year, $122 million a year projected of that increase when a community comes together and begin to design how they begin to plan the future of their community. You have in Buffalo, New York, where family engagement, they met in person at 20 different community schools across Buffalo. Every Saturday, they call it Saturday Academy, where they quickly pivoted and went online and actually increased their parent engagement and participation and planning with parents across. And I can name community after community where different things from out of school time to health began to develop. But the how piece of it is really shifting the mindset from, it's not just the school. Jeffrey, I know you talked about the failing piece. You know, it's not the school that fails. It's not the community that fails. So it's the failed processes that we have. People want to do good. People are doing good, but really executing those 3 C's: communication, coordination, and collaboration, and some of the how.
So one of our observations in this work over the last, I guess, 10 years that Purpose Built's been in life, in my time at Eastlake before that, is that co-location does not automatically translate into collaboration. Right. And you made a really good point, Jose, I think, about having somebody whose job it is to make sure that this collaboration really happens with intentionality. I'd be interested in hearing from both of you about ways that might work, other stakeholders who might play a role, or the way other folks who are involved in this work can support the school that may not have that person right now who can manage all those relationships, right? Who'd like to jump in?
Paul, you mind if I get us started?
No, go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, so right now you talk about that person. Anybody could be that person. You know, when I started off, you talk about the first elevation of work. I was in my 20s in a neighborhood and volunteering. The volunteering led to employment by a nonprofit. Right now, what we're looking at is yes, there's a few thousand, several thousand community schools, but have a list of just under 1,000 community schools and 146 school districts and just under 400 different zip codes. Within that, they're serving over 500,000 children, but there's over 200 different partners: school districts, United Ways, universities, grassroots organizations, who actually have a person that they designate, what we call a community school coordinator, but whatever their title is, whose job it is to bring people together, co-design what their future looks like, and mitigate any barriers they have in achieving it.
Paul, I'd love to hear from you on, you know, that right now, 400 plus partners. You know, if you're a principal in an under-resourced school and you've got all these well-meaning folks who say, hi, I'm here to help. What you've been in that leadership position, what are the things that a principal can do right off the top of the bat, in order to be able to bring some kind of structure, some kind of ability to partner really effectively? Because volunteers need leadership, school needs leadership, partners need leadership. What works from your experience?
Well, let me take it from a slightly different angle. There are things principals can do. There are things school systems can do to give the principal the capacity to do the work. But I mean, at base, it comes down to what Jose was talking about. It takes people, somebody who wakes up each day thinking about the work. I've done this work on the ground and established a backbone organization in my home community some while ago. One day I found myself in state government as Deval Patrick, Secretary of Education. And the governor asked us to put together a children's cabinet statewide, and I co-chaired it with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And we brought together all the departments of state government to work on these issues. We had great meetings. We made common cause. We recognized it was all one client. We made commitments to do long-term work, but the work didn't really hit its stride or get going until we actually jointly hired someone. The centrifugal force of our respective silos is just too strong. And while we commit to breaking down silos, you have to put some structure, you have to put some people in place. And what's true at the macro level, like at the state level, is true at the local level. In order to have a relationship, you've got to meet people halfway. And school principals right now don't have the folks to meet outside people halfway. So the other part I wanted to say is, I think that this needs to be pushed to the mayoral level. I was delighted to see Mayor Nutter in the group today. We focused a lot of our work at Redesign on getting mayors to chair children's cabinets to make the point that this isn't just schoolwork. School people are maxed out right now. There is no additional capacity. So until the community comes together and starts to not only pool its resources and communicate and collaborate, but work on policies that incentivize the building of capacity and backbone organizations at the community level, I don't think you're going to be able to see individual principals accomplish this work on their own.
Certainly not in a sustainable way. You know, every now and again we see, you know, this amazing, charismatic superhero principal who is able to do things that no one expects them to be able to do. And then when that principal retires or is reassigned to another school, everything kind of drifts back into the way it used to be, right? So I want to come back to this idea of structures and systems. Jose, tell us a little bit about what it takes to ensure that every single school can have these resources, every single partner can do, every single school can have these resources, and the partners can work together effectively in order to drive outcomes for kids.
Yes, everybody in the neighborhood knows this, that the professionals that work there will soon leave. They're going to retire, change jobs. So you got to come up with a regenerative process. That's why I harped on the 3 C's so much, so that it lasts through generations. Now, as far as a system creation of how we can create that, so imagine an area that has multiple neighborhoods that begin a coordinating, like I mentioned with the census. What Paul was talking about and what we see growing around the country, you have Sun Valley Community School Initiative, which has works with 15 different school districts, urban, suburban, and rural. You have like Multnomah County with the Portland area, which is a collaborative of the city and the county and 6 different school districts around the area. I named my own very own, again, Albuquerque, New Mexico, which what I like to call, they put the wedding band on. They put the wedding band on, and they have a joint power agreement between the city, the county, the school district, the United Way, the Hispano Chamber of Commerce, and the university. So together, when they begin to, as Paul mentioned, there's a person just like at the place level, the neighborhood level, who does that in a neighborhood space through a school. There's also a person at that system level, as Paul talked about. I happen to be one of those people as well, who helps manage those communications and actually begin to blend and braid their resources, which includes funding, which includes space, which includes actually processes that they have as far as procurement, and how they begin to make it more nimble for the many different organizations who can do place-based, to see place-based work through the many different organizations.
That was a word that I have not thought of in the context of this work, regenerative. And I love that. I think I'm going to steal that and use that.
I didn't make it up, so you can use it.
You know, but that's it. It is building, you know, ongoing capacity. I'd love to hear your thoughts, both of you, as we're about to run out of time. But you know, the connection between early learning and elementary schools, and thinking about partnerships between elementary schools and neighborhood serving early learning. In our experience, that has been one of the game changers when we've been able to help every little genius in a community have access to high quality early learning, and then work to have those early learning centers partner effectively with the neighborhood elementary schools. We've seen great outcomes. Do you have any experience or any observations that you'd make there, or what we can do to maybe incent principals and others to be thinking about that connective tissue?
Well, I think I'll start off on this if you don't mind. Again, the whole notion goes to the broader design of the cradle to career pipeline, which we're in separate silos. We have early childhood one place, we have K-12 another place, higher ed another place. What we've promoted at Redesign is this notion of through a children's cabinet, which is designing that pipeline, have an expectation that the community actually has an individualized success plan for each child and a navigator, much as they do at the Northside Achievement Zone, where there is a family advocate, somebody who follows that child and looks at the child as an individual. One of our big faults in education is batch processing, mass production, but instead see each child for who she is, meet her where she is, give her what she needs inside and outside of school. So if you do this in a chronological, longitudinal way, you'll see that so many of our children don't have access to high quality early childhood. So you start there, and that becomes a lead agenda item on the children's cabinet's agenda, and a point where from the standpoint of policy and investment, they make it a priority.
Thank you. Jose, I see you just put something in the chat, and I think this will have to be our last word.
Sure. So I'll put a little, the connection with early childhood and elementary you're talking about. I want to make that connection between that video right there is a brief story of a connection between early childhood purpose around social and economic mobility. So in there, the short story is, I got a chance to just see 14 moms who predominantly spoke Spanish, who couldn't participate in their elementary children's education because they had younger children at home. And they couldn't work, some of them couldn't work in America because of their status. So they came together, and the partners that the coordinator worked with them through, the universities, the community colleges, businesses, they formed a preschool co-op. Our state senator, who's now a mayor, now the mayor. And today, all 14 moms graduated with early childhood certificates. Some of them are teachers. 5 of them went on to establish their own business, which they couldn't make money by work for somebody, but they actually could earn money by owning their own business through preschool. So I just wanted to share that without going too much in details. People can take a look at it.
Thank you. I think everybody will want to take a look at that at their convenience. You know, I want to come back by starting or finish up by making the point that Paul made. The time is now. There's a sense of urgency, I think, both on the ground that has been that COVID has in fact re-upped. And I think there's a new opportunity that people understand that investing in place, people and place together can create great opportunities, a stronger economic future for both individuals and our country. So I think we're on the right track here. Jose Munoz and Paul Reville, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. I'm gonna look forward to continuing the rest of the day.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you all.